You know, at Jason Drives, every week we receive thousands, or actually tens of thousands, of requests for us to drive certain cars. And the one that we've received more requests for than almost anything else has been the Fisker Karma. That's actually not 100% true. What we've really gotten tens of thousands of requests to see is a comparison between the Fisker Karma and a Citroen C6. So you know, when you look at the Citroen compared to like the Fisker, they're two very different approaches to the same kind of idea. The Fisker is dramatic. The Fisker looks kind of exaggerated almost. It's got these very dramatic proportions. It's hard to ignore. It's low and it's wide and it's aggressive. It feels like it was designed from the outside in. The Citroen feels like they were designing a living room with a steering wheel and some couches in it, and then they wrapped the most aerodynamic shell they could around that. And depending on what your goals are, you know, I think they both have their place. When you're cross-shopping cars, one of the most important things you're probably considering is, what are all the stuff inside that makes it go? What is actually going on under the hood so I can get places? So let's check out what's going on in the Fisker. The Fisker has this long undulating hood. You've got to assume there's a lot of exciting things happening under here. So let's see what we got. And we're completely wrong. There's nothing exciting going on under here, really. What we've got here is a 2-liter GM Ecotec 4-cylinder engine. I don't even know how much horsepower it makes because it just doesn't even matter, because this engine is never used to actually drive the wheels. What this engine actually does is charge the batteries, so the pair of 161 horsepower electric motors mounted in the back can actually drive the wheels directly. Let's go check out what's under the hood of the Citroen and see how things are different. So, you know, comparing this engine to the one of the Fisker, all we've really got in common, really, is the fact that there's a big kind of silly plastic cover over the engine. In the Citroen, this engine is actually driving the wheels directly. It's a diesel engine, it makes about 200 horsepower, and it's driving the front wheels. Here, the unusual stuff are probably the hydrodynamic spheres for the active hydrodynamic suspension it has. And other than that, it's a fairly straightforward, modern V6 turbo diesel engine. Now, the Fisker Interior is interesting for a lot of reasons. First of all, you'll notice that there's enough leather covering every surface in here that it looks like probably what Ed Gein's house would have looked like if he was a cow. But the thing you really notice is that there's just not a lot of room in here because the inside is tiny. And that's because the inside is filled with stuff, most of which is this massive battery pack that goes all the way down the middle of the car. Everything in here is bulky, so the actual room for you as a person is pretty minimal. The interior of the Citroen C6 is really very different than the Fisker. They're really two kind of opposite poles of car design. There's a lot less leather, they're not afraid to use some plastic, but what there is a lot more of is room. There's not that massive console in the middle, there's a lot more horizontal room, there's a lot more headroom, and you're sitting more upright and high than you were inside the Fisker without actually being, you know, like SUV tall. It's just more of a positioning. You're not like leaning back quite as much. All right, so we're here in the car with Sid, who's the owner of this lovely Fisker Karma, and we're going to take her for a quick drive. So I'm going to push the little clear button that says D and some green lights flash, and we're off. So, you know, like all electric cars, this thing has good initial acceleration. It's very, very smooth, of course, being a 1-speed transmission. There's no gear jumps, there's no anything like that. It's just a nice, smooth torque curve here. Now, in theory, I should see no performance difference when the gas motor's on, because it's not actually driving the wheels. Oh yeah, the acceleration's great. And it makes a nice Jetsons sounding kind of hum as you kind of whip into it. This is a 5,600 pound car. You could sort of feel that. There's a lot of, feel the momentum of this car?
I'll tell you though, it's pretty comfortable in the back seat. I can get
That's
used
good.
to this.
Yeah. Would you like me to be your chauffeur?
Yeah.
Drive you around?
I won't even make you wear one of those hats.
You can make me wear a hat. That's not so bad. I have a bald spot that needs covering anyway. So. I'm trying to get a feel for the handling here. It's pretty neutral, I think, because there's so much weight right in the center. Visibility out the rear is kind of minimal. That rear window is not huge, and the C-pillars are massive, so there's pretty good-sized blind spots. And you see the car's massive hips when you look out over through your mirrors there. The steering's fairly responsive. It's precise. You don't get a whole lot of feedback through the wheel, but it is precise. You know, it feels good. It's smooth like an electric car is. And you know, there is an advantage to having that gas motor there. I mean, even though the Teslas do go way farther on just electricity, when you do have to recharge it, if you're lucky enough to find a supercharger, even that takes a half hour to get to 80%. The infrastructure of electric cars really isn't there yet. So in a lot of ways, this would be a much easier car to own, especially if you travel long distances. All right, we're gonna drive the Citroen C6 now. Start it up, hear that characteristic diesel gurgle. I'd like the driving position on this thing is, I like it. Like the visibility is actually really good in this car, and I kind of like being, you're sitting so upright. It's almost like you're at like a seat in a table. Yeah, you know, the steering's more sensitive than I would have expected, which is kind of neat. Like it doesn't take, like the motions that are required are minimal, which I think kind of goes along with the whole Citroen philosophy of just everything easy. Like this is, you could drive with one finger, no problem in this car. Maybe that was the goal. Maybe they assumed you'd be smoking with one hand, have a massive baguette in the other, and just be using, you know, the blown smoke rings to actually move the wheel around. You know, it's interesting. They've somehow managed to make something that feels incredibly smooth, but not ponderous. Like Cadillacs were certainly soft suspension-wise, and they weren't bumpy, but they always felt wallowy, like a big, you know, like a big boat. Like my grandfather, an old late 70s Cadillac I used to drive around when I was like 16 or 17. This somehow manages to get that degree of softness, but with precise feeling handling. Oh wow, it's actually got pretty decent pickup.
It's not bad for a diesel.
No, I was surprised. I was expecting something more sluggish, but you put it down and it goes, especially for the size of the car.
Yeah.
I'm actually very impressed with the acceleration.
Oh, this thing is, I love this car.
This car, yeah, it's a pretty fantastic car, and like it doesn't compromise much for how much you get. Like the Fisker I knew would be fast, like so that wasn't really a shock, but this I'm genuinely surprised at how quick it actually is, especially for a diesel.
If I had to drive cross country, this is the car I'd take.
Yeah, you'd be right. This would be an amazing car for a cross country trip.
Yeah.
This would be a very easy car to live with. It'd be fun. Nobody else has one. There's a lot of fun things about this car. So after driving both cars and doing a lot of evaluation, we had a huge stack of data and numbers, and we ran them through the Jalopnik mainframe, which is located underneath the sex dungeon at the bottom of the Empire State Building. If you've been calculating at home, this should be no surprise to you at all. The winner is, of course, a 1960 Nash Metropolitan.
When I was driving the Metropolitan,
Oh yeah.
policeman pulled me over. He wanted to know what kind of a car it was. And I was pleading with him to give me a speeding ticket so I could show it to my friends.
This is meth. This is good cocaine. That's the difference.
Right.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. The right, that's not the left right.
Should have tapped him on the shoulder.
Yeah. Like, I'm actually genuinely surprised how it is. Why did it beep at me? It says service. Okay. I'm really late for some sort of religious service.